Right. Welcome here to the emergence of humanity. We talked about what is history. We talked about time, how humans have talked about time. Now let's get to humans. Where did humans come into this story? Right. And first we talk about sort of the emergence of humanity, hominids in general. Then we'll get to the Homo sapien groups, which will ultimately get us into this Paleolithic and then later Neolithic transition. So we're getting closer to complex society, things we would understand today as like cities and all of that stuff. But it takes a little bit of time to get there. So, the human family tree. So this is kind of amongst the humans are part of this large hominid group that consists of apes and humans. One branch of these, before this branch in this tree, there were chimpanzees, gorillas, groups over here. But these constitute what scientists have put together as different branches of this group that is leading to us, this Homo sapiens species that is up here. Earliest one, Ardipithecus group, which is either just simple sort of standing, right? This is transition to being more upright. But these groups, the ends here, right? They contributed to this tree, but they branched off. And then this other Panthropus group, another group that branched off, but they also didn't make it. Australopithecus group, which is a little more defined, a little more able to move around and control themselves. And ultimately, out of this comes these other Homo groups, which we are a part of, right? And there's other hominid groups as well that come about, and humans are associated in many ways of all of these different sort of trials and errors of early evolutionary offshoots and offsprings. And this is one way to look at it. So I've been reading some other theories, other ways to think about this. Instead of like a clear defined tree with branches, some people present this as sort of a scrubland, that there's a lot of like these little shrubberies, these little groups of little shrubs, and some interact with some branch off and go on their own. But how these sort of shrubs work together to create this sort of landscape of the Homo groups. But this kind of show us where we are on this branch. But some of these earlier ones, the Ardipithecus, again, one of the earlier standing upright ones, groups of this hominid world. Here, I mean, a lot of this, all we have left is some skeletons that get recreated. But skeletons can really tell us a lot about bone structure and various things. These earliest groups, 6.4 million years ago. So again, these hominid groups, again, if you zoom out, humans are hominids, which are part of mammals. So mammals have been around for a long time. We're branches of that. Panthropus group, and another group that their skeletons have a much broader, wider heads than what these hominid groups. They were a little bit 3 million years ago, a little bit closer. Australopithecus, kind of the most famous one. Here's the most famous skeleton of Australopithecus, often referred to as Lucy here, that was found in, I think, modern-day Ethiopia, Eastern Africa. And again, this is very clear. The bones that exist shows this bipedal motion, but they're also very small, 3.5 feet tall, 65 pounds. Lucy was discovered in 1974, and then from that, as now that as more skeletons are getting found, they can get slotted into these understandings of this sort of early hominid groups. But really, what kind of we want to get the Homo species, which came humans, right? But humans were related to a lot of these other groups. All of the Homo species, probably about 3 million years ago, of the Homo species. They started in Africa, most of them, and then different waves would migrate out of Africa at different times. Some of the other Homo species that you might have known about, Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Denisovians, Heidelbergians, and again, some of our perspectives, these groups have changed over time. There used to be sort of that these groups were sort of cavemen living in these very simple lives. But actually, as we're learning more about them, these Neanderthals, Homo erectus, Cro-Magnons are actually very more similar to us than we would think. They're not these sort of brainless, sort of just brutes. Some of the features of these groups, all of them walked upright. As you can see, these new renditions of these groups, they look a lot more human than earlier interpretations. All of them have used stone tools. We find stone tools in Neanderthals groups. They manipulate to control fire. They probably all had some form of language. They could plan, communicate, lived in sort of smaller societies as well. Um, and we also are finding more now that a lot of these groups interacted with each other. That it wasn't like they lived in these little pockets. That we have interactions between Devanosians and Homo erectus and Neanderthals. They spread to different regions, and then more interactions there. And again, and some probably stayed back in Africa, and as they interbred and grouped and more offshoots, these shrubs or branches came apart. About 300,000 years ago, out of that came Homo sapiens. Right? And a lot of, if you look back in time, how far would you have to go back before we could recognize humans as humans? And it usually talks about 300,000 years ago, or the beginning of the Paleolithic period, which is what we'll talk about in the next lecture.